Hello, and welcome to this video on the Levelling EQ Amplifier from 4MS, a module based on classic studio compressors and EQs, along with a smart stereo image control. In this video, we'll explore how these things work in a wide range of musical styles, and here's what's to come. This video is sponsored by 4MS Company. So this is the Levelling EQ Amplifier, the LEQA, and it's a stereo processing module based on compression and limiting inspired by the classic studio piece, the LA2A, and then there's an EQ based on the legendary 1073 Neve EQ, and then on top of that we get a great stereo width control and stereo creation device at the input. And I have a couple of things to discuss here before the features and the patches, so skip ahead to the timing on screen if you'd like, and grab a brew, because there's plenty of details in the features to go through as well. While discussing the module with my Patreon community, multiple people asked for a demo that wasn't just how this module works and sounds, but for me to take a broader look at how EQ and compression works, but most importantly why you might want or need these functions. And to quote someone directly from the DivKid Discord, "These sorts of modules are not self-explanatory. I think it's my own lack of understanding. A filter filters, a delay delays, these are self-evident. End of chain compression etc. isn't. I can maybe hear a difference with an A-B, but it doesn't mean that I grok it. Beside the kind of umbrella of sounding better, what is this for?" And I can imagine that statement resonates with many people watching this. We don't all use modular synths and come from a background of experience with engineering or music production. So in this video, I'm going to take a bit more time not just to show how the LEQA sounds, but what I'm thinking and why I'm doing what I'm doing, and what I'm going for as I change the tone and shape of the sounds going through the module. This has also been a community audio project where Patreon supporters have sent in sounds to be processed through the module. Thank you to everyone that sent audio in, as this gives us a wider, richer musical palette of sounds to work with, and it lets you hear the module processing your own sounds. If you'd like to get involved with activities like this in the future, head to patreon.com/DivKid to join the community. So on to the features. The Levelling EQ Amplifier is 14 HP, and we have a stereo input and a stereo output, and the first thing in the chain is a stereo width control, and that has a CV input too, which takes a 0 to 5 volt signal. The stereo width processing works in mono when you just patch to the left input, or in stereo when you patch into both inputs. And both modes offer a modern range of techniques to create or control a stereo image, with Haas psychoacoustic delay timing effects and mid-side controls. The manual on the 4MS website offers lots of information and some nice graphics about how this works if you'd like to know more. Moving up the panel, we then have a 4-band EQ, and we start with a high-pass filter here where we can select the frequencies for 50, 80, 160 or 300 Hz, or off on this button. There's then a low shelf where you can select 35, 60, 110 or 220 Hz. There's a mid bell curve section where we have selection for 360 or 700 Hz, 1.6, 3.2, 4.8 and 7.2 kHz. And there's a high shelf with a fixed frequency of 10 kHz as well. You can hold the low frequency selection to change the gain on those EQ bands from plus and minus 5 dB to plus and minus 15 dB. And that's labelled nicely on the panel. We have a switch to place the EQ pre or post compressor, and that's a bypass in the middle too. And finally, we have an EQ output level, which is handily an output level for the whole module when that's set post, or when set pre, that can set the level going into the compressor. So going up the panel, we have that white section with a compressor based on the classic LA2A optical compressor. 4MS talk about what an optical compressor is and how the response of an incandescent lamp and photocell used in those original circuits is key to what makes those vintage optical compressors so highly sought after. Again, check out the manual for loads of good info. The compressor is really simple to use, where we have an amount pot here which changes the threshold at which compression starts to happen. You can see the gain reduction on this LED meter with 0 dB when they're off to minus 24 dB when they're all on. There's a switch to go from a 3:1 compressor ratio through bypass in the middle to a 10:1 limiting ratio on the right. The gain knob provides an output level boost, commonly known as makeup gain, where you can make up the level that you've lost by compressing a signal, and that happens at the end of that compression chain. There's then a mix knob that takes us from fully dry, i.e. off, through parallel mixing and blending to being fully wet all the way to the right. So this is a powerful set of audio shaping functions that can be very subtle and corrective or say stylish in their shaping, but you can push it to be larger than life, ultra wide, bright or deep, really notch out frequencies heavily. You can massage those dynamics or really slam it, and we'll explore all of that in the video. Thanks again to Patreon supporters who sent in audio examples. I hope this provides a good set of lessons in how EQ and compression works, what it sounds like, how to listen to what it's doing, and how you can use it in a wide range of styles. The timing index has been on screen, and that's in the video description below. So without further ado, let's dive in. So I started this patch thinking that I'd absolutely smash these drums in the Levelling EQ Amplifier. But really, something subtle is all I needed to really bring this to life. If I bypass this in and out a couple of times, it just sounds super flat in comparison, and have a really nice mixture here of synthesized drums and sampled drums, lots of probability and changing rhythms. It's exactly the kind of thing I like to do making modular beats. And just starting with the compression here, I'll bypass the EQ. We're in comp mode. Not that much of an amount really. You can see not a huge amount of gain reduction, and we're 50-50 for a parallel compression. If I go fully wet, if you listen to the kick, that's where this is most obvious. It's the loudest part in this drum beat. We could go to limit, which really snaps at that kick drum really aggressively. It's got this totally nuked kind of turbo limiting sound, which could work really well as a parallel layer. But as a parallel layer there, I think the normal compression works best. It's a stylistic choice. If you like that more kind of nuked, tighter, punchy low end, go to limiting. There it is again, fully wet. And if you want a more subtle control, simply go to comp. Then for the EQ, that's in post here. I've not done a huge amount. The high shelf is picking, of course it's really brittle with a 15 dB boost, but that nice tight upper high end in those hi-hats. The kick drum I have at 110 for the low shelf. I'm really picking out the kick drum. You can hear that at 110, we can really target that low end. There's nothing else here in the mix, certainly nothing down low, anywhere near that kick, so we can really kind of sculpt the kick drum level. If we were to limit, so really nuke that kick in the limiting, even in parallel compression, then EQ, you can kind of recover the kick drum and totally reshape the low end with post low boost after heavy limiting. Sticking with comp though, and just a little bit of boost, I've set this up here at a particular mid frequency where I can really target the clap and the reverb, which is this sound. This kind of metallic resonator-like sound that I'm adding to my clap. I can really target that there with the EQ. Again, I think it just sounds really good. So here's some audio from Get Still. And if I just take this into bypass, it's fairly subtle, but I think some nice shaping that again is enhancing and serving the music. I've set the compression just to kind of catch some of the peaks, so it's quite subtle, there's not much reduction. In the EQ I'm using to really play with that bright top end, and you can hear there in that reverb if I just boost this a lot. It's quite gritty kind of top end, and you might want that. Stylistically you might want to just back that off and just warm things up. Similarly for the mids, I think the reverb sounds great at 1.6k here, but I think those plucks are maybe a little bit too sharp in that kind of mid area. So as this loops back round and we've just got these percussive plucks, let's explore these mids again. I think backing those off actually works really nicely. But as I say, boosting that for the reverb works. So in terms of an output processor for a mix, you just have to make that choice. Similarly for the top end, I think it works really well on these percussive hits, but it's a little bit fizzy, gritty almost in the reverb. And then with the bass, we'll just wait for that to come in. We can really get at with that 60 Hz setting, that clean sub bass. But I think it's a little bit much in the mix, so just backing off slightly. And as you can see, just a few kind of larger dynamic moments being caught by the compressor, slightly wider image. It's really handy to have this control to hand, where you can shape things quickly on the fly. So here I have this kind of simple electro thing going on, where I'm sequencing the width over my bass line. And there's a really lovely kind of monoing, because it is mono, it's a mono input, so it's not actually turning it to mono, it already is. But taking it from mono to wide, back to mono, and then kind of ultra wide, and that bit louder. Now taking out the other sounds here, we can actually turn down the resonance here too. Very simple, square wave into a filter and VCA with an envelope. Super basic synth sound. But it's this green trace here that I'm using, a simple 4-step sequence to push into wide, back to mono, and then even wider. And on its highest voltage step there, pushing kind of all the way around wide here. It actually gets quite a bit louder, which is quite nice as well. Have a very little bit of subtle EQ, subtle compression, just a bit of shaping. But certainly when that filter is quite resonant. I really love those kind of electro laser zaps in ultra wide stereo. Bringing the drums back in. Super simple, but really effective. So here's a track from Patreon supporter RVHNS called Moonshine. I think this is a really good example of why compression in EQ is so good. If I bypass it, it certainly sounds much flatter, brighter, deeper, richer, and more impact. Now if I bypass the EQ and we just go in and out of the compression, which is fully wet here, listen to that kick drum if you want something to focus on there. And that detail in the top end. And then with the EQ, if I flatten everything first, I'm using a 60 Hz low shelf. Multiple times in this video, turning this up full in a low EQ just worked really well. And I don't really know why, because it's a 15 dB boost. It's a lot of EQ, but it just sounds really good. But some of that, giving that punch and pulse, that low end to the kick drum, works really well. And that's what the compressor's grabbing before the EQ, so you can kind of recover some of that low end in a really nice way. The high shelf at 10K can get very brittle on this particular example, but just a bit of it really pulls out that stick definition and all those little clicks in the nice percussion here. And then the mids at 3.2, again we're focused on that percussion more than anything. Again, just a little boost. I think it sounds great. If I again bypass both together, and you could back this off and be even more subtle here. I just quite like being quite obvious, maybe a bit heavier handed than I would be for the purpose of a demo video. So while it's really nice to widen and brighten things, and we've certainly done plenty of that in the video, sometimes you just want to reduce the width of a stereo image and control any harsh or high frequency kind of biting tones in a sound. And I think Rings here is a prime example, and of course a popular module, that has a kind of overly wide stereo image for a lot of uses, and it can get a little bit bright and a bit harsh as you start cranking its brightness control up. Now this is Rings into the LEQA, then into my effects. I remove the effects. Let's bypass the EQ, and this is the default stereo image. Each note on Rings fires hard left, hard right, if you use these as a left and right stereo image, that is. And in headphones, certainly, it can be a bit disorientating. It's too wide. There's kind of no center image because it's such a wide sound. So actually reducing this, it's still stereo, it still feels quite wide, but it's more like panning a mixer kind of 10 and 2 rather than hard left and right. It's a much more pleasant listen to the sounds bouncing side to side more subtly than all the way left, all the way right. And one nice thing of reducing that stereo image too, if I bring my effects back in, it felt like as I turned up the mix on my effects, they kind of bloomed out wide in stereo around this image, rather than, if I remove that, it feels like the dry sound is so extreme, pushing left and right. The effects kind of don't feel as wide anymore. And then with the EQ, just quickly here, setting this pre-compression, which is on just to catch any stray peaks. I'm really buying back detail around this brightness control. If I turn this all the way up, Rings can get quite harsh. So if I reduce the very highest frequencies on that shelf, and then at 4.8K, reduce that kind of biting upper mid, and turning it to try and highlight what you're listening to here. A slight reduction there. Just takes that harsh edge off, even with brightness all the way up. So I can be playful, modulate in and out of brighter sounds, or just warming things up. And yeah, not making them as harsh or removing the harshness. What a great sound this is. And this is just exploring self-patched feedback. There's no other modules used, no effects, other than a copy coming across here, just to visualize, but we're not going through data. This is the right output on a stacking cable, patched back to the left input. So right out to left in. I'm taking the left and right as stereo to record and monitor. And at these settings, this is what's happened. And it's the width control here with those short delay kind of Hass effects, I think, creating all this beating. Let's go back into mono here. We're pre for our EQ. I'm set to limit, just so we can keep a hard handle on this self-patched feedback. It's just feedback. Let's just play around, and even though the limiter is on, this may really squeal at some point, so just watch the level. I'll stop talking, and we can explore. And this kind of exploration can be fairly endless, but let's move on to some other patches. So here's a very up-close, intimate recording of a flute that Omri Cohen sent me. And it's very subtle use of the LEQA here, with the compressor just catching some peaks on those louder phrases. Barely any activity, as you'll see, but the EQ is letting me kind of reshape this noise and breath of this very up-close sound. If I bypass these, there's a very kind of gritty, almost kind of like sandpapery edge to that breathy upper mid and in the high end. I'll leave the compressor on just to catch some occasional peaks, and adding the EQ in post, you can hear we have a much smoother sound. I'm high passing because there's no low end, so if there's any in the recording I don't want it. And then that high end, above 10k, it's just kind of sizzle. We can get rid of some of that, and I found that at 4.8k, that's where a lot of this kind of more aggressive overtone and rustly breathiness is. So reducing some is working well. And as a mono input, certainly in headphones you should hear this expanding and contracting width that we can create from that sound. So here I'm really fat-ending up some drum breaks. Some nice jungle drum and bass drums that are quite thin and weedy, and to be part of this kind of more modern drum and bass style of production, definitely needed some added smack and weight. If I turn down the Levelling EQ Amplifier, here's everything not going through the module, which is this big Reese bass patch and some effects. If you'd like a full rundown of all the details in making the bass sound, you can get that exclusively on patreon.com/DivKid, but let's focus on what the module's actually doing here for its demo. So starting with everything in bypass, this is mono in and mono out. The drum breaks sound fine, but as I said, they're kind of weedy and a bit thin for a more modern kind of production style. So starting with the compression and limiting here, if I go fully wet and go into that 10:1 limit, really intense hard smack to that sound. Amount is nearly up full. I've set the gain just to taste. This blending that in from being too over the top, sometimes referred to as New York style compression or parallel compression, blending in some of that intense limited version, just under 50-50 there, adds a lot of weight while keeping that kind of dry transient sound nice and clear in the mix. If I turn it off, you can hear how much it's adding, even though the mix is leaning towards dry, just under 50-50 dry-wet there. Now going on to the EQ, I first went in with the low and just boosted 110 Hz up full. You can hear that kick at the start of the bar. Just has the kind of weight you might expect from more of a modern drum production. But if I actually engage the high pass filter, which seems counterintuitive on low end, but if I just put the 50 Hz high pass in, kind of sub that kind of sits under that kick just gets tightened up, and that really helps when there's a lot of bass in the actual bass synth patch as well. And then the mids at 3.2K there. This is where all that kind of transient smack is in the limiting, and we're pre-limiting here, so this is all pushing into the compressor of the EQ. I found that frequency specifically is where that kind of crack in the snare drum is. And then the 10K high shelf. It's all the detail in the hi-hats and the cymbals. So quite a bit of EQ, a lot of limiting in parallel. And it's taken some run-of-the-mill drum breaks. In something much bigger and more exciting. Now bringing the other sounds in. If you'd like a full detailed rundown of the patch, including synthesizing the bass sound and the effects, get that exclusively on patreon.com/DivKid. So here's a really lovely piece from Patreon supporter Origin ST. And I'm using compression here to try and pull up this reverse kind of granular style loop in the background, using the EQ to kind of not just reduce the noise, but change where the noise is sitting in relation to the piano and effects sounds. And I think I've come up with something that works really well and serves the music in an enhancing way. And it's a little bit heavy-handed, but I really want to get these examples nice and clear. And let's start with the compression. I'll back everything off but go fully wet. Going to 3:1. That's going to be much more musical for this application. But I don't really want to hear the compression, which you can hear if you listen to the noise profile. If you can't hear it kind of grabbing onto those piano notes, the noise ducks and comes up as the piano notes fade. You can hear this kind of like whoosh, 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 as the noise kind of rises off those fading piano notes. So there's two approaches here. We could back off the amount, but I do want a good amount of compression, because I'm trying to bring up that kind of reverse sound in the background. So if we stick around here, but then use the dry wet to go parallel, maybe around 50-50. Apologies for my poor vocalization. I think it does pull that reverse sound up nicely, and letting the dry come through, it reduces the effect of hearing the compression of it pumping and doing too much. Now, leaving that in place, I'll go post with the EQ. And let's first look at the low end. I've put the high pass in. If I go too far here, we can hear that just high passes and reduces all the low end. But I do think we can get away with a 50 or possibly even an 80 hertz high pass filter here. There's not lots of kind of sub information in the piano, or none that we want. If we go through with the low EQ here, there's not much down there to boost. 110 starts to bring out that low end in the piano, but 220, all that warmth and body and resonance of the instrument sits in there. If I cut it, you can hear, hopefully you can hear that difference. So boosting that, I think, will work well here. The highs, it's that 10k and up boost, so it's all the hissy bits of the noise. There's nothing really above 10k we need in the piano. So I'd be tempted to fully reduce it, and I think it sits well, that warmer noise profile over a hissy one would be a stylistic choice to make, but I do think it works well just reducing it. Leaving it where it is though, if I go through some of the mid frequencies, lots of the information there, around 700. For the piano. If I go up to 3.2, all the kind of mechanical sounds, the foot pedal, the actual mechanisms of the keys, is sat in there along with all that noise. So you might want to boost that and reduce the top end. But what I think we could do, well, what I know we could do, if we go up to the 7.2k there, that's getting at that noise more than the 10k high shelf. So I think actually reducing the noise here, and maybe even then boosting, hopefully you can hear right in the high end, that actually boosting back a bit of the hiss, reducing where the noise is sitting around 7k, more warmth in the low end, little bit of amplitude shaping with the compression, pulling up that reverse sound in the background. And once again, let's A-B a few times here. So I think we're serving the music well here, and the tools are sounding great for just shaping the texture, the depth, the ambience in the mix, the mechanical parts of that intimate piano, and that nice reverse, kind of granular swell sound in the background being brought forward slightly. So this patch started with me looking at using the LEQA to make mono effects stereo. But that's turned into kind of processing the whole drone patch rather than just the wet effects here. And modulating width, giving this lovely stereo pulsing. And as I change some notes here on the keyboard, certainly if you've got headphones on, hopefully you can hear this nice stereo image that comes from a mono input. Going through the signal chain here, this is Platts into the crush delay, around 50-50 dry wet. That's a PT delay, and all that noise you're hearing swooshing around is from the delay. The delay goes into a fully wet phaser from DivKid Tech here, and then back to the Music View modular spring reverb with the inbuilt brick reverb, again 50-50 dry wet. and it is just a mono input here. This is simply how it sounds. I have a tiny bit of compression and some EQ just for a bit of nice colour. That's very subtle. And as I turn up the stereo here, which I'll first do very slowly, all the way to kind of ultra wide. Back to mono. This is the stereo image as a 2D shape. And as the frequency at the input changes, the psychoacoustic short delay times in the Hass effect will create a slightly different stereo image. And you can push ultra wide here. Which when you go back to mono, kind of really adds a lot of life. It might seem quite subtle. But I think the difference is huge between no stereo image, these are all just mono modules, and then having a stereo image there provided by the Levelling EQ Amplifier. Now here's a unipolar LFO, this takes 0 to 5 volts, so setting it just slightly wider than mono, we can modulate ultra wide, which gives a bit of a volume pulse as well. And that's a nice stereoizing, creating stereo from mono effects chains and a mono drone patch. So here's a great track from Paulie Bow called I Quit My Job, an instrumental version of it. Thanks for sending this over. And here we have some post EQ, fairly subtle, but then some not so subtle parallel limiting. If I bypass, it's got that extra bit of punch, bit more low end, and I'm using the mids here at 700 Hz. You can hear how they're really focusing on that voice, that pad in the background. I think we could be a bit cleaner, it's maybe a bit too much build up. So just a subtle cut there, a little bit of this extra crispy. Crispy top end. So it's a very subtle smiley face, a little bit of extra bass, a little bit of extra top, slight cut in the mids. Bypass again. Subtle as it is, it feels like a great bit of additional processing on the sound there. So EQ, compression, clipping and limiting is a nice thing to have in a feedback loop. So I've put the LEQA here in the feedback loop around my delay effects. The dry sound is this quite basic plat sound. That comes into a module there I'm using as a stereo mixer onto both sides, left and right. That feeds the left and right input of the cosmic debris, is clocked as a delay, and I have a split of the output here that we're listening to. Here it is fully wet, you can hear we don't have much feedback. There's a copy here visualizing the stereo image, but importantly for the feedback loop, I have a copy coming out into the LEQA, back into this stereo mixer, that's then feeding the input, therefore creating the feedback loop. So if I turn this up with things set fairly neutral, you can hear we're adding feedback to those delay effects. If I just keep adding level here, maybe add some low EQ, take off some high end, we can build up the low end in this feedback loop, while also compressing that feedback loop just to keep it under control. We could say strip out the low end and boost the mids. And you can see that compressing and hear it just kind of clamping and massaging this feedback. And as a reminder, we're just listening fully wet here, without this feedback. That's the sound of the delay. We're going through the LEQA and back in again. And let's bring the dry sound back in as well. So we have the fully wet delay and the dry now. And I'll just work my way up these mid frequencies. You could have a more tasteful, musical, lingering feedback. But the beauty of this EQ, which is before the compression, you just want to kind of blow it out as I have been. You've got that safety net of compressing or even just hard limiting the feedback too. So here's a great guitar part and recording from Truck. Thanks to him for sending this over. It's a pleasure to use for the video. And I've added some effects to this in the modular. We'll remove them in a moment. But the LEQA here is at the end of chain, adding overall kind of shape and thickness with the compression, extra sustain to these ringing guitar notes. And then I've totally kind of reshaped the EQ and a little bit of extra stereo width. If I go in and out of bypassing both of these, we'll then go through what's going on. So leaving those out in bypass, let's remove the effects that I've added. And this is the sound. A nice kind of two-part stereo guitar recording. And I first went into the compression here with the idea that we could reshape these notes and add a lot of sustain to those ringing notes. And if I just take this into the comp mode, quite a level boost, but that presence around those plucked notes, it's not just louder. You kind of feel the pick attack that bit more, even on this softer playing. And then the few dB of gain reduction, just riding the natural dynamics of the playing, is adding a lot of thickness to the sound. Then going into the EQ, I'll do this post the compression. I have a high pass set to 80 Hz. There's nothing really at 80 and under here, so let's just get rid of it. And then in the high shelf at 10K, there's nothing in a clean guitar at 10K and up that you're going to want, so I'm going to get rid of that entirely as well. But then in the low end, I found that 220 Hz is where all the kind of warmth and body sits. So even if I just boost this full, 15 dB of low end boost, it really adds a weight and thickness after the compression that's adding the sustain to it. I think it sounds great, even up full. Although I'd back it off, I think it's a little bit much. It does work for a solo guitar part. If this was in a mix, you wouldn't be adding as much kind of low mid there. But as this is solo, let's add that kind of tasty low boost. And then I found that 3.2K in the mids is where all that kind of twang and presence of the guitar's sitting. That's maybe a little harsh as we boost it, and I think just cutting some of it, I think this reshapes the tone in a really lovely way. Let's bypass the EQ. just softens it down, warms it up. Again, I think a lovely job of serving the music and enhancing the sound. So starting with a really extreme version of what we're doing here I'm doing some stereo oscillator wave shaping. This was a saw wave coming in, or is just a mono saw wave coming in. Let's clean things up and kind of build back to this big shifting stereo waveform. So we have a saw wave coming in, and as a kind of starting point, this is set mono here on the width. I wanted to look at what that stereoizing, i.e. a verb to make mono stereo. I wanted to look at what that stereo creation is like from a mono source, and to do so on something as basic as an oscillator. So if I start to bring this up, you instantly see we get a different behaviour here in this first part of the knob. And if you've got headphones on, this should be clear in that there's a nice slight and subtle stereo image, but you can hear the stereo image. And as we push right of centre, we actually get a kind of CS80, the Yamaha CS80 famous polysynth, kind of pulse or hybrid wave, where it's on top of the slightly shifted right output and on the bottom portion of the left output. So modulating that with just a unipolar positive only LFO here, we get the introduction of this pulse. I'll go into the left. We get both bits of that stereo creation there. And I'll come back to that in a moment. Let's enable the EQ, and we'll do that pre-compression. And you can hear and see some quite drastic wave shaping there. Cancelling things out, high passing, cut a lot of energy out of that wave. It's quite a low tuned oscillator, but playing with the bass here at 60 Hz, you can really emphasise and kind of warm up that fundamental low end, right through to just pushing this into more of a triangle, or almost, it's clipping but like a soft clipped sine almost. It's very kind of warm and lovely compared to that buzzy bright saw on the way in. Then in the mids, I'll go for all the frequencies here, boost the level a bit. Highs, it's then just the fizziest of high frequencies affected up at 10k. So you can be quite extreme here. We could then push that into the compression. Now there's nothing dynamic, it's just a flat oscillator coming in, flat as in always the same level, but just slamming it in to start clipping this more aggressively. Amount and gain up full, amount around half. Let's go fully wet. And then that EQ, we can just push the EQ level fully into it as well. We could then make that stereo again. Ooh, there we go. That change is huge now. Modulate stereo again with the width. So although very extreme, let's use this as the start of a stereo processed oscillator and just set it in a quite simple musical patch. So just quickly here, I've set this processing of an oscillator with the LEQA here just in kind of context of a basic bass or melodic style patch. There's a volt proactive signal going to my saw wave oscillator. That single saw wave is the single left or mono input here. LEQA creates a stereo image that you can see here into two channels of a low pass gate, which I'm treating as a hard left and hard right signal. But it's the same envelope to both channels here. So the stereo difference comes from that creation of stereo with the width control and modulation here. And then this comes into some reverb. Let's lose the reverb for now. And we can really shift in and out of different sounds here. And that modulation of width that we had in the previous patch is still pushing and creating that stereo movement. And heavy clipping, let's remove it. I do like these warmer kind of big bass with a little bit of crispy harmonic on top type sounds. A simple kind of musical application for taking a single saw wave oscillator, creating and modulating a stereo image, and some aggressive shaping to then create an interesting stereo sound to articulate as you like. If you've got this far in the video, drop an EQ sync down in the comments. Was the video useful? Not just for the LEQA, but for EQ and compression and output style processing in general? Do let us know. Head to patreon.com/DivKid to support what we do and to join in the community projects like we have in this video, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye!